Okay, I want you to picture a scene. It's the late 16th century.
Hmm.
There's a man, he's sitting on a tatami mat. He's a warrior. His day job involves the kind of brutal, visceral violence that most of us can't even watch in movies.
Right, without covering our eyes.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking decapitations, arrows, blood, the whole thing.
It's a grim profession.
It is. But this same man, after he washes the blood off, he sits down and spends an hour arranging a single iris flower in a vase.
Wow.
And he does it with this, like, absolute trembling geometric precision. He's adjusting a petal by a millimeter. And then he whisks a bowl of tea and writes a 4-line poem about how the dew on that flower is like a human life.
Beautiful. Perfect.
Yeah.
And gone in a second.
Gone in a second. It sounds like a total contradiction.
Or maybe a split personality.
Right. It feels like two different people. But that paradox is exactly what we are unpacking today. We're talking about the samurai, but more specifically, we're talking about the operating system that ran them.
We're talking about Bushido.
The way of the warrior.
And I love that you called it an operating system, because that really is what it is. It's the cultural software that, programmed Japan for 7 centuries.
And if we look at our sources for this deep dive, it's software that's arguably still running in the background of Tokyo boardrooms today.
Oh, for sure.
We have a really eclectic stack of sources for this one. We've got a heavy academic study that compares, I think, 29 historical texts dating back to the 12th century.
Yeah, that's some real heavy lifting there.
We also have the 1899 classic, Bushido, The Soul of Japan. And then we have these modern business blogs with titles like, and I love this, More Bushido, Less Bullshido.
That is a kitschy title. But it kind of points to the mission we have today, right?
Yeah.
We need to figure out, was this code actually real, or did we just romanticize it for Hollywood? How do you mix Buddhism with bloodshed? And maybe most importantly, how does a code about dying gracefully end up being responsible for the efficiency of a Toyota factory?
It's a huge scope. And I think to understand the how, we have to start with the what. Because I think most people hear Bushido and they assume it's like the 10 Commandments.
Right, a list carved in stone that every samurai had memorized.
Yeah.
And that's probably the first misconception we need to clear up. If you were a young samurai in, say, the year 1600, you couldn't just go to the local library and check out the official rule book of Bushido.
So it wasn't written down.
Not as a single unified text, no. It was much more organic. The word itself, Bushido, it literally translates to military nightways.
Okay.
But for most of history, it was a set of maxims, oral traditions, and house rules passed from father to son or lord to retainer. And the reason it's so complex and, frankly, so fascinating is that it's a remix.
A remix.
Yes. It's a cultural mashup of 3 very different philosophies that, on paper, really shouldn't work together.
Okay, let's break down the recipe. What are the ingredients?
Well, ingredient number 1 is Buddhism, specifically Zen Buddhism. Now, usually when we think of Buddhism in the West, we think of pacifism.
Yeah, meditation, peace, not harming a fly. It seems totally incompatible with being a professional killer.
It does. But for the samurai, Zen wasn't about pacifism. It was about the suspension of thought. It was about mental mechanics. If you were in a sword fight and you stopped to think, did I leave the stove on, or I really don't want to die today? Well, you're already dead. Your reaction time is too slow.
So Zen was about getting into that flow state.
That's exactly it. Zen gave them a stoic composure. It taught them to submit to the inevitable. It allowed them to look at life and death with a sense of indifference, friendliness with death even.
It quieted the noise so they could just act.
Precisely.
Okay, so Zen is the mind control. What's the second ingredient?
Shinto. This is Japan's indigenous religion. While Zen looked inward at the mind, Shinto looked outward at the land, the ancestors, the nature of Japan itself. Shinto provided the loyalty to the sovereign, the reverence for forefathers, and a deep, almost spiritual patriotism. It made the soil of Japan itself sacred.
And the third?
Confucianism. This was the import from China. And Confucianism is all about social geometry. It defines the relationships. Father and son, master and servant, older brother and younger brother. It provided the ethical structure, the hierarchy.
So to simplify this potent cocktail, Zen gave them nerves of steel, Shinto gave them the patriotic soul,
Right.
and Confucianism gave them the org chart.
That is a perfect way to synthesize it. And while there wasn't a single rule book, these 3 pillars supported a set of virtues that eventually did get codified.
And this brings us to Natobe Inazu. He's a central figure in our sources, right?
Yeah.
In 1899, he wrote Bushido, The Soul of Japan, and he listed 8 core virtues.
He did.
We don't need to memorize all 8, but I do want to dig into the ones that really seem to drive the behavior.
Well, you have to start with G. Rectitude or justice. Nitobe calls this the bone of the samurai. Without bones, the head cannot rest on the spine. It's the ability to make a decision and stick to it because it is the right thing to do.
So it's intellectual and moral firmness.
Exactly.
Then you have Makoto honesty, or veracity. This one stood out to me because of how it relates to our modern world of, contracts and lawyers.
This is huge. For a samurai, the idea of a written promise was almost insulting.
Really?
Yeah. If a samurai said, "I will do this," it was considered done. The act of speaking and the act of doing were viewed as the same thing. To ask a samurai for a written guarantee was to question his Makoto, which was a grave insult.
So my word is my bond, but on steroids.
Precisely. But then, to keep this from just being a code for robots, you have Jin benevolence. This is the counterbalance. Bushido wasn't just about being a Terminator.
Right.
A samurai who was strong, but lacked Jin sympathy for the weak, love for others. He wasn't considered a warrior. He was considered a barbarian.
That's the poetry side of the paradox again. The strength to kill, but the benevolence to appreciate the flower.
Exactly. But here is where we hit the invention controversy. And this is, I think, the intellectual meat of our deep dive today.
Right. Because one of our key sources, that study by Christian Etzrott, tackles this pretty cynical theory that's been floating around for decades.
The theory that Nitobe Inazu basically made all of this up in 1899.
Yeah.
And it's a valid skepticism. I mean, think about the context. It's 1899. Japan is rapidly modernizing, opening up to the West. Nitobe is writing this book in English for an American and European audience.
He wants to explain Japan to people like Theodore Roosevelt and JFK, who, by the way, both read and loved the book.
They did. So the accusation is that he painted this rosy, romantic picture of noble knights to impress the Western powers.
While the actual history of the samurai was much messier, much less principled.
Correct. Critics have argued he invented a tradition to give Japan a seat at the table of civilized nations. But Etzrott's study, the one in our source stack, actually went back and did the hard work to test this theory.
He audited the history.
He did. He performed a content analysis of 29 original samurai texts dating from the Kamakura period in 1192 all the way to the Edo period. He literally counted the frequency of these concepts to see if Nitobe was, hallucinating.
What was the verdict? Did Nitobe make it up?
Surprisingly, no. The study vindicated him. The research found that when Nitobe described virtues like honor, benevolence, and honesty, he was capturing the majority position of the ancient texts. He wasn't inventing these values. He was accurately summarizing centuries of thought.
That's pretty validating, but were there any discrepancies? Did you get anything wrong?
There was one fascinating nuance. Courage.
Okay.
In Hollywood movies, courage is everything for a hero, right? If you're brave, you're good. But in the historical texts Etzrott analyzed, courage was often viewed as a lesser virtue.
Wait, how can a warrior code devalue courage? That seems completely counterintuitive.
Well, it's not that it was bad, but it was seen as neutral. A thief can be courageous. A murderer can be brave.
That's a good point.
The texts argued that courage is only a virtue if it is supported by Gibby rectitude. Being brave for the wrong reason, or dying simply to show you aren't afraid, was called a dog's death.
Dog's death? That's a harsh phrase.
It is, but it emphasizes that the cause matters more than the adrenaline. And speaking of death, we have to address the elephant in the room.
Probably the skeleton in the room.
Right.
Yay.
You cannot talk about Bushido without talking about the obsession with death.
No, you can't. The Hagakure, arguably the definitive samurai manual, has that famous line, "The way of the samurai is found in death." When you hear that today, it just sounds like a death cult.
It does sound incredibly grim to modern ears. But we have to look at the philosophy behind it. It wasn't about seeking death because you hate life. It was about freedom.
Freedom.
The idea was, if a samurai lives his life assuming he is already dead, he has nothing to lose.
So it removes fear.
Completely. If you are already dead, you don't hesitate. You can speak truth to power. You can charge into battle. You can do what is right because you aren't trying to save your own skin. You're free from the shackles of self-preservation.
One of our sources mentions a daily meditation practice that really drives this home. It's pretty graphic.
Oh, it's intense. They were instructed to meditate daily every single morning.
Wow.
Visualizing themselves being ripped apart by arrows, carried away by waves, burned by fire, struck by lightning.
Just imagining every possible horrible way to die.
Every single day. The idea was desensitization. If you've already died 1,000 times in your imagination, the real thing won't make you flinch. You can maintain your composure.
And this leads to the ultimate expression of that control, seppuku, ritual suicide.
We have to be careful not to view this through a modern lens of despair or mental health. Seppuku was a legal, ceremonial institution. It was a privilege.
A privilege.
Yes. If a warrior was defeated or disgraced, seppuku was the mechanism to restore that honor. It was considered a deed of bravery to take one's own life to wipe the slate clean.
And we have such a visceral example of this from the Mykoya source, the story of the blood sealings. I have to admit, when I read this, I had to put my tablet down for a second. It is haunting.
It is. This is the story of Tori Mototada. The year is 1600. Japan is on the brink of its biggest civil war. Mototada is defending Fushimi Castle for his lord, Tokugawa Ieyasu.
Okay.
He knows a massive army is coming. He knows he's outnumbered. He knows it's a suicide mission.
But his job wasn't to win, it was to delay.
Exactly. To buy his lord time to escape and regroup. And he did. He held out for 11 days against 40,000 men. When the castle finally fell and flames were engulfing the complex, he and his surviving 380 men gathered in a single room.
And they committed seppuku? All of them.
They did. And here's where the story gets bizarre. Usually after a siege, you burn the castle or wash the floors. But in this case, the blood of those 380 men soaked so deeply into the floorboards that it permanently stained the grain of the wood.
And they didn't throw the wood away.
No. Years later, to honor their spirits and their sacrifice, those floorboards were carefully removed. They were taken to Kyoto and installed as the ceilings of 5 different temples, including Yoganin.
So you can go there today.
You can go there right now. You walk into the temple, you look up, and you see the footprints, the outlines of armor, and the handprints in human blood from the year 1600.
That is the most metal thing I have ever heard. But it's incredibly respectful.
It's revered. It's called Chitenjo. It stands as physical proof of Chugi absolute loyalty. They bought the future of the shogunate with their lives.
But this concept of loyalty, it's a double-edged sword, and I feel like we need to turn the page here. Because when we get to the 20th century, Bushido changes.
It really does.
It stops being about individual honor and starts looking like something else entirely.
This is the tragic turn. We have to distinguish between the feudal Bushido and the imperial Bushido of World War II. In the feudal era, loyalty was usually to your direct lord, a personal local relationship. But during the militarism of the 1930s and 40s, the government hijacked Bushido.
They took the operating system and installed malware.
That's a perfect way to put it. They repurposed the code to demand unquestioning obedience to the state and the emperor. They took that concept of friendliness with death and just weaponized it on a massive scale.
And this is where we get the Gokusai mentality mentioned in the sources.
Yes, Gyokusai translates to shattering like a jewel. The propaganda machine taught that it is beautiful to shatter completely, to die in a suicide attack, rather than compromise or surrender.
Which had horrific consequences for how they treated others, specifically prisoners of war.
It did. And this is a hard psychological pivot to understand, but it's crucial. Under this distorted version of Bushido, surrender was the ultimate moral failure. If you surrendered, you weren't just a defeated combatant. You ceased to be honorable. You ceased to be fully human.
And tragically, the Japanese troops projected that view onto the Allied soldiers who surrendered.
Exactly. They felt that by mistreating POWs, starving them, beating them, engaging in atrocities like the rape of Nanking, they were treating them with the contempt they deserved for not choosing death. They viewed mercy as a weakness.
It's chilling. It shows how a philosophy about benevolence, remember Jen, can be twisted into a justification for absolute cruelty.
It is a cautionary tale. Any ideology, no matter how noble its roots, becomes dangerous when it demands the total suspension of critical thinking.
When loyalty becomes absolute, morality often evaporates.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've seen the ancient noble code and we've seen the WWII distortion, but Japan isn't run by shoguns or militarists anymore. Does Bushido still exist in 2024?
It absolutely does, but it's morphed again. It migrated from the battlefield to the boardroom. One of our sources from Corval sums it up with that great line: more Bushido, less Bushido.
I love that, but what does it mean practically?
Well, think about those core virtues: D, integrity, and Makoto, honesty. In the West, we have 50-page contracts because we fundamentally don't trust each other.
Right. We need lawyers to catch the loopholes.
In traditional Japanese business culture, influenced by Bushido, the relationship is the contract.
So breaking a verbal agreement is worse than being sued.
Much worse. A breach of trust is a loss of face. It brings shame. And that social pressure is often more powerful than any legal threat.
And we see it in the work ethic too, right? The salaryman culture.
Yes. The tradition of lifetime employment, though it is changing with the younger generation, is a direct echo of the feudal retainer system. You give the company your total loyalty, and in exchange, the company protects you and your family. You belong to the clan.
And what about Kaizen? We hear that word associated with Toyota and manufacturing all the time.
Kaizen means continuous improvement. You can trace that right back to the samurai's relentless pursuit of mastery. A samurai would practice a single sword stroke 10,000 times to make it perfect.
And a modern Japanese worker applies that same obsessive dedication to shaving zero point 0.5 seconds off an assembly line process.
It's the same software, just running on different hardware.
Exactly.
And look at omotenashi Japanese hospitality. If you've ever been to a department store in Tokyo and seen the staff bow, or had a clerk anticipate your needs before you even ask, that is the echo of Rei. Respect and benevolence. It's serving with dignity.
But just like in the war, there is a modern dark side to this loyalty too. We have to mention karoshi.
Yes. Karoshi. The literal translation is death from overwork.
It's a recognized medical cause of death in Japan.
It is. It's heart attacks or strokes caused by stress and starvation from working extreme hours. It is the dark echo of death is duty.
Instead of dying for the emperor on an island, you're dying for the corporation at your desk at 11 p.m.
You're neglecting your health, your sleep, your family, because leaving early would be disloyal to the team.
It's fascinating how the exact same root value can produce Toyota's world-class efficiency and a heart attack at age 40.
It really highlights that Bushido is a tool. At its best, it creates a society of incredible harmony, precision, and trust. At its worst, it creates a machine that grinds people down.
You know, despite the dark side, I feel like there is still a massive appetite for this in the West. We love The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. We watch anime like Gintama or Demon Slayer. Why are we so obsessed with this?
I think it's because we live in a very transactional world. Everything today is quid pro quo.
Everything is what's in it for me, or how do I maximize my ROI?
And Bushido's the opposite. Bushido asks, what is the right thing to do even if it costs me everything? There's a romance to that level of commitment. We crave that kind of moral certainty. I mean, Gintama is a great example. It's a comedy set in the sci-fi world with aliens, but the main character still sticks to his own personal code. He fights for what he believes in, regardless of the odds. And that resonates.
So as we wrap this deep dive up, how do we synthesize this? We have a code that gave us flower arranging and tea ceremonies, but also seppuku and kamikaze pilots. It gave us impeccable service and karoshi.
I think we have to see Bushido as a spectrum. The code is about service and loyalty. The critical variable is, who is the master?
Who are you serving?
Exactly. If your master is a set of high ethical principles, truth, justice, benevolence, then Bushido makes you a saint. It makes you a protector of the weak.
But if your master is a flawed human leader or a corrupt government or a profit-hungry corporation,
then that same loyalty makes you a dangerous weapon. The most dangerous samurai was always the one who stopped thinking for himself.
that leads us to the final thought I want to leave with you today. We've talked a lot about loyalty. We all say we value it. We want loyal friends, loyal spouses, loyal employees. We think of it as an unalloyed good.
But here's the provocation. In a modern world that values individual freedom, is there still a place for the samurai's level of self-sacrifice?
Or does that kind of total devotion always carry the risk of being weaponized? If you are a good soldier for the wrong cause, are you actually a good person?
That's the double-edged sword of loyalty. It cuts both ways.
Something to think about the next time you promise your undying loyalty to a sports team, a brand, or a boss. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the soul of Japan.
It's been a pleasure.